So we're going to move on to story building in tabletop games. This is very important to me because I've been a part of so many different tabletop games over the years. I've been playing role playing games since I was really young. I would say 13 years old, and that was a long time ago. And like like in the beginning, being the game master or the dungeon master never really appealed to me. It wasn't until later until I saw it as you're the director of the film and you're creating this world for your players to play in, and that's the side that actually appealed to me. Now with story building though, it's not just a hard knowledge of the rules. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but if you let the rules dictate your story, then essentially there is no story. Take for example of any MMORPG. I'm not going to say they don't have story. They do have a semblance of story, but it probably would be greater if it was a little bit more involved. Like DC Universe Online. At times I feel like I'm just like beating up people like in a mob rather than actually doing anything to build my character, and all that building of that character is just kind of in my head and not in the actual game itself. So that's why it's really important, because there are many pitfalls when you are trying to story build a great tabletop game. Whether you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, whether you're playing Rifts or Shadowrun, Augmented Biscuits, and my own experience in playing Dungeons and Dragons, we did have a DM that tried to build a story, but also tried to keep in between the lines of the rules of the game, which okay, that's fine, but it became really restrictive, and we're going to talk about some examples of that. One of my big pet peeves, and I believe when we were playing, because your wife was actually involved in the game as well, when we were playing, is that the miniature, the way we controlled our miniatures basically affected our gameplay. If we walked away from a person to like say step back and I don't know, maybe shoot him with an arrow in the face. Basically, it said, well, you can't do that. You can't do that. You would get some sort of weird opportunity attack. The dungeon master basically said, no, that like puts you in an opportunity attack. And like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. Well, you can't do that. And it's like, why? Because you're not adjacent to the... And like, it just became so bogged down with rules. Is like, am I playing a tabletop game or am I playing a computer game? Because if I'm playing a computer game, I'll do that at home by myself against a computer, which is fine. Like if you need that like sort of like fulfillment.
I think the one big thing that I've had, I mean, I've had very few sessions. I've only had one group, and it was the same group. It wasn't fun. I guess that's honestly what it came down to. It just was not fun. It was. I know we talked about this before, and I think he just failed to kind of adapt his story or to what the actions we were doing. I know you were trying to do these awesome actions in the game, but every time you try to do something, he would do some kind of restriction. So essentially it came down to you being in your friend's room and your friend saying, no, you can't touch that. No, you can't touch that. No, you can't touch this. You can't play with that. No, you can only play with this. And it was a ball and there was a ball in the cup. You couldn't play Bone Storm. You only had the ball in the cup. That's a Simpsons reference. My wife, that actually kind of soured her on the whole D&D experience. She didn't care for that because she played D&D when she was younger with her dad. So one of those things, just kind of restricting people's fun to it, and also it's I would say it's bad for your DM to say, no, you can't do that. I know chucking dice during that game, you did make a very good suggestion, which is, no, I can't do it. Name, you just roll for it. Like you would say, I'm gonna do this awesome backflip, and the DM would say, no, you can't. He's like, well, why don't I roll for it? Yeah. And the DM was like, okay, roll for it, and if you get this, you can do it. Which are you supposed to play? Which is what he did, and it actually made it a little more enjoyable. I can see why the DM was doing that. There's people can think of ridiculous actions you can do. We weren't doing anything unreasonable, but it's one of those things that was nice that chucking dice was more open to. Well, if your players are trying to do these kind of out of the ordinary actions, let them roll for it. You can just roll for something like that, which is great. I think one of the other things that kind of bothered me too was that, and I know Chuck and Dice will go into this more, was the stories. He was the DM was making the story along as he was going, but he was also making it more convoluted than it should have been. He just made it more difficult. He made the story a lot more confusing than it should have been. It was actually a very simple story, but he made it much more just to kind of build up the intrigue and mystery. It's just like you're making it more convoluted than it should be. Like you don't need to make it this complicated. And I think one of probably my last gripes is that he didn't seem to have much experience with DMing, which I don't fault him for that, but there was times where there was times where we sat there for 5 to 10 minutes so that he can read the rules, which was jarring. We were in the flow of the game, and it was jarring because we would have to stop and he would have to read. Oh, you took this hit. Let me see how that affects your armor and blah blah blah. And we're just like, come on, dude, let's just make this simple.
Sometimes it's up to the game master to create a flow to the game where everyone is having a good time. Everyone's always having fun, and there's no boring points in the game. And they have to improv to a certain extent. Not to a great extent where they, are making up as they go along, like the entire story. They do have to have some kind of outline, but there's a level of like unpredictability that the players can put into it that might change the scope of the game. And you do have to kind of adapt to in those situations. But there is actually a other side of players. I was playing a Shadowrun campaign, and there were 2 of these players that were in our group that were more interested in doing the huge special attack, like their 1-a-day attack that does like 10,000 hit points of damage. And every time they would use it basically they monopolize the game so they can do this little special Kamehameha attack. And it became really boring to all the other players because we were just sitting there waiting for them to finish. And that brings me up to the point, like, the players actually do have to build the story as well. They can't just, like, think of their character as this, like, badass person that just comes onto the field, does, like, an attack that, like, kills every enemy in the actual game in one shot, and then they go back to like collect experience points. If you want that, you can always do that in a computer game. With role playing games, you are trying to build the story of your character as well. So you have to kind of think in those lines rather than just be the person who just kind of like shoots the other guy or wants to shoot the other guy in one shot. Maybe think of it as, okay, so how would my character react? Like, what kind of like John Woo move should I use here that'll make it interesting rather than just make it quick? I know that they get these powers for a reason. It's because they want to have some kind of attack that will help them out in the last minute. But when that becomes every single attack on every round, it becomes boring for everyone else. So players have to keep in mind that you are a part of a group of players that need to work together to do stuff. You guys are just doing an individual attack or whatever. If you see a player in trouble, you need to go help them. Like if there's an orc attacking a prone player that's on the ground, he's coming down on his axe. It's up. You got to put your sword right in front of your friend there and hold it like that. You got to do like Lord of the Rings type action, or I'll even Game of Thrones type group action. It's not all about you doing your final super strike Hadouken. It's actually about working together as a group. You have so many different things that you can do in a role-playing aspect where you don't have to be just, well, I'm the guy who just heals people, which I think is really boring, just to be the person who heals people. Or I'm the guy who just, stands in front of people to get shot at. You can think in those terms if you want, but the best way to do it is just like having a discussion amongst each of the players so that, we're not just sitting quietly as one person talks. I mean, how many times have you seen like a martial arts movie where one person is just beating up everyone for like about an hour, and then like he steps out and sits down while the other guy comes in and beats up everyone they're usually working together as a group. They're like throwing a guy into another person so he can kick him in the face, and that that guy can fall to the ground and
or he's using another guy's head to punch the other bad guy. Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, that's the. I think that was a lot of things people get stuck in is when you're playing a tabletop game, you should be playing as a group. I know that was one thing we ran into. We talked about and we discussed, and we kind of ran into that when we were playing your game, Spaceship Azathoth. Was we were taking turns, but we found it more. We found the battles a lot easier if we kind of all maybe kind of gravitated towards the same area and helped take out some of the battleships, things like that, some of the fighters, and I think it became a different game. It became a game of a group of heroes, coming together and helping. Are there any suggestions you would give people for as far as story-wise? Like, if you are going to be the DM, you are going to build this story, is would you say like it's nice for people to kind of have maybe like a general outline before they start a campaign?
Yeah, definitely think of what the goal is for the players. If the goal is to go into a dungeon and save the king's daughter and bring her back alive back to the castle, make sure you set that out. Make sure that that's the goal. If it's to get this ancient treasure or whatever, always put that goal in there. Don't make them go blindly into the dungeon for no reason at all. I would actually suggest something to all dungeon masters, that rather than do individual initiative, if you want it to kind of pick up more, maybe just do group initiative. You can even do it without modifiers. You can just roll 20-sided dice just to see who goes first, because essentially that stuff doesn't really matter as much as you think. Sure, if if you are a rule hound and that's exciting to you and such, go ahead and do it. But if you do it in a group manner, that might be a little bit better, just because then you'll have the group work together a little more rather than not at all. Because I always see when we do individual initiative, it seems to always break down into the same patterns of people attacking. A guy who has invisibility will just turn invisible. A guy who has like a super sword uppercut thing will always use that same one over and over again. In every role-playing game book I've read that talked about the rules, they always say this book is only a guide. You can learn everything in here, and all this. You can take all the suggestions that it makes. Definitely like combat would be one that makes sense. Just follow the rules of combat and such. But it says like it's just a suggestion. You should tailor it to your needs, or whatever needs that suit you. It's not a competition. It's not a board game where it's not Warhammer where I'm on one side and you're on one side and we're trying to obliterate each other's army. It should be seen as you're telling a story, and these players are helping you tell that story come to life. Heck, you can even start giving them romantic interest and such, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Make something that brings that game alive to them.
So that about wraps it up.
Just to let you know, if you are listening to this podcast, I've started streaming on the PlayStation Network. I've been playing a couple of games here. I've streamed Gone Home. I'm doing King's Quest right now, and I've done DC Universe as well as Mega Man and the Resident Evil 7 teaser trailer. We're actually going to probably start doing co-op streaming as well once we figure that out, and we'll be streaming together. A lot of these co-op games, so stay tuned for that.
I will also plug my streaming as well. I just started it not too long, maybe a couple of days ago. I did my first one. I have a few games too that I stream. The first game I actually streamed was Elder Scrolls Online. That's actually the only one I've streamed so far. But yeah, as Chuck and Dice mentioned, we are trying to find games both he and I either own or can get that we can co-op with. Currently, we only have 3 games between the two of us that we both own that we can stream. But yeah, keep a lookout. You can find my stream. I'm either gonna stream on my Twitch, which is Incognitbro, or that's INCOGNIETBRO. Or you can also find me on my YouTube, which is, I'm actually probably going to do YouTube because that goes along with our cooperators. My YouTube is just CIN1122.
Oh. But yeah, we'll have all the details on where our Twitch is. I actually have a Twitch as well, but I never really use it because I usually use YouTube. If we get more viewers who would like to donate, then maybe we'll switch over to Twitch. But right now, it's all going to be on YouTube, and hopefully we won't get a copyright strike. So that wraps it up for this episode, episode 5. Look for us on streaming, and we'll see you next time.